Hey, what's up guys? My name's Josh LeBlanc. Welcome back to The Real Reviews, where I review films by The Real. Now, as you probably saw in the title, today I'll be ranking my top 10 films of 2019. Two things to keep in mind though before we get into this list. Number one, this is my list. That means that these are just my opinions. I'm not saying this is the correct list. I'm not saying that you should go by this list and think all these different ways about these movies. Because it's just my opinion. This is just what I got out of these films. And then the second thing is that I haven't seen every single movie, so I apologize if there's a couple missing from this list that you're pretty confused about why they're not on here, because quite frankly, there's a possibility I just haven't seen it. With that being said, let's get right into it. So I'm actually going to start our list off with an honorable mention. I got a few honorable mentions I want to talk about, and that's going to be dispersed throughout this list. I'm going to keep coming back to them every now and then. And they're in no particular order. I just sprinkled some honorable mentions throughout the video. It doesn't mean that I like some more than others. I feel like they are all sort of worthy of being in this top 10. Unfortunately, they just didn't make the cut. So with that being said, let's get into the first one. Our first honorable mention is Rocket Man. Now this film was directed by Dexter Fletcher, and this is the guy who actually picked up Bohemian Rhapsody from Bryan Singer, who got fired from the project during production of Bohemian Rhapsody, because of just the nature of what these films are trying to do, and also the fact that it's by the same director. I gotta compare the two, and honestly, if I had to pick one or the other, I gotta go with this movie, because this film is overall just way more consistent with its pacing. I really enjoyed how it told the story in a unique way of Elton John. They kind of turned it into a musical. It wasn't your standard biopic. And Taron Egerton is fantastic as Elton John, and he really gives an outstanding performance, and he also sings incredibly well. I really liked hearing him sing. Plus, it's Elton John. With that out of the way, let's get into number 10.
We get into a fight, I accidentally kill you, I go to jail.
Anybody accidentally kills anybody in a fight, they go to jail. It's called manslaughter.
Once Upon a Time was directed by Quentin Tarantino, and it is an old-fashioned film about old-fashioned Hollywood. This is just one of those films that people don't really do nowadays unless your name is like Martin Scorsese or Quentin Tarantino, and I really appreciated what this did. Between like The Irishman and Once Upon a Time, this is like levels above for me, because they're both long films. I feel like this one is just more entertaining to watch. I mean, this isn't as long as The Irishman, but even still, length to me doesn't matter as long as it's well paced and it doesn't feel like I'm sitting there for hours upon end. And while unfortunately for me the first half of this movie is pretty slow, it can feel like two different movies once DiCaprio's character kind of gets back from Italy and does his own thing. But the final 10 minutes of this movie is just pure Tarantino awesomeness, and I had a lot of great laughs sitting through this movie, not even just the end, because Brad Pitt and DiCaprio are awesome.
Come in!
Morning, Shelby.
Morning, Molly. Up yours. I'll go to hell.
Ford v Ferrari is directed by James Mangold, and it tells a true story about the tension between Ford and Ferrari in the 1960s and how they were competing against each other to create the faster car. I think that with the exception of one other film on this list, this is probably the most approachable film to just kind of walk into and sit down and watch. I feel like after watching this film, if I walked into a random movie theater and this was playing, I'd have no problem with just sitting down and watching it. It is a very entertaining film to watch. Christian Bale and Matt Damon have amazing chemistry together, and they're both really funny. And it's also doesn't hurt that the racing scenes in this are truly stellar, and they're even really exhilarating at their best. I really love this film. Dr. Sleep is written and directed by Mike Flanagan, and he does an excellent job creating a modern take on the sequel to the Shining film from 1980. I really loved how thrilling this film got, It did start off a bit slow, but at about the halfway point, even though I was interested in the story already, something happens where it just gets kicked into high gear and I'm at the edge of my seat probably every second of the remaining runtime. It's always a pleasure to see Ewan McGregor in a film, and I really liked how this movie continued the story from the first film, but also changed it up without, you know, being disrespectful to what came before. Yeah, I like this film.
You can play all the lowest keys on a piano at the same time.
Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood surprised me a lot, actually. I was really surprised by how much I loved this film, because I haven't actually seen the show. Like, I didn't grow up watching the Mr. Rogers show. And then on top of that, I was kind of concerned when I found out that Mr. Rogers isn't actually like the main character in this film, because I was pretty intrigued with what I've heard about him as just a character and this persona in television. But this is still an extremely heartwarming and emotional film that I really love just sitting through and just taking it all in. It's a little depressing and pessimistic at first, but it's necessary because it's a part of this developing arc about not just forgiving those that you love, but forgiving yourself. And this idea of forgiveness really made an impact on me, because I feel like everyone's been there where they have grudges on people that they just can't let go of, and sometimes you just gotta forgive them. Tom Hanks is intoxicating as Mr. Rogers. It's so weird. He plays this super joyful guy, as I'm sure you already probably know, but it's just so weird because he kind of comes off as like alien in a way, with how just easy it is for him to bring a smile to your face, and he's not even the real guy. He's doing his best impression and performance to recreate this beloved childhood figure for so many people, and I loved it for that. It was a great film. Going into our next honorable mention, we have Us. This was a film directed by Jordan Peele, and this was probably the most thrilling horror film that came out this year. Now, I haven't seen all the horror films, but I really loved most of this film. The first 2/3 of this movie was so insane, and if the final third didn't stretch the lore a little bit and ruin my suspension of disbelief for the events that were going on, I think this is easily top 5 of the year. But unfortunately, that final third just goes a little bit too much into the symbolism, and it doesn't really work for me all the time.
Today you boys will be involved in such activities as war games, ambush techniques, and blowing stuff up.
I don't think I can do this.
Was? Of course you can.
Jojo Rabbit is directed by Taika Waititi, who is proving to become one of the most flexible directors of this decade. I really love his work. I haven't seen all of it, but after seeing this film and loving Thor Ragnarok, I gotta learn more about this guy and the work that he's done, because it's almost like every project he takes on, it's completely different from the last one. You know, with his most previous film, Thor Ragnarok, is a super action-packed adventure. This is a sarcastic and smartly written commentary about preconceptions of people and looking at the world with a much broader view and understanding basic moral principles, and I really enjoyed it for that. And the unique spin it has, which is that it follows a young Nazi boy with a narrow perspective on society, is really cool to me, and it walks that fine line of not quite being too offensive, but still having some maybe slightly controversial subject matter. But I think films should be controversial, in my opinion, because sometimes that's how we learn the best lessons, and I really admire this film for being that. Moving into our top 5, we have Joker. Now, this film was directed by Todd Phillips, who has probably just opened a huge amount of doors for him in terms of where he wants to go next with his career, because nobody could stop talking about this film, and rightfully so, because it's fantastic. honestly, and I mean this in the best way possible, I don't know if I want to watch it again because of how much like anxiety it gave me and how much fear was just like oozing through my veins. And I don't mean that because it's a horror film. I mean because it made me care about this sociopathic character that we've been grown to like hatefully love as a villain, and now we kind of see this other side of him where we get to dive deep into the psychological aspect of how he came to be the famous villain Joker. And it has some great social commentary about how society shapes who we are and how cruel the public can be sometimes, and how we kind of dive deeper into this rabbit hole of hate and anti-empathetic nature. And it's also just got probably the most amazing score of any film this year. It's so unique and bone-chilling, and I loved it. And Joaquin Phoenix, if he does not get nominated for an Oscar, I'm never watching a single film again, because he really goes in for this film. Great work.
And away we go.
John Wick Parabellum is easily the most entertaining film I've seen all year in a theater. And I mean this from the perspective of going into kind of a crowded auditorium and just hearing everyone go, ooh, ah, and feeling everybody wince along with you at all like the nasty like hits and kills, and just marveling at how beautiful the stunt choreography is. This and the Mission Impossible films are the prime example for why there should be a best stunt work category in the Oscars, because this is like unprecedented. No one can top this film in terms of its choreography and its fight scenes. I loved just seeing Keanu Reeves kick ass once again. He continues to up his game for each one of these films, and Chad Stahelski is easily one of the most talented directors in terms of action set pieces, and given that he comes from a stunt work background, that was really awesome for me to see. This is probably the film that tops Ford v Ferrari as the film that I could probably just put on any time of the day and just watch it and enjoy it and love it. I could throw it on right now and honestly sit through the whole thing and love it just as much as I did when I saw it in theaters. It was really great. Our next honorable mention is going to be Ad Astra. I fought with myself so much on whether or not I should put this movie in my top 10 list, because it's got a lot of great qualities, but like it's hard to ignore the fact that this can be kind of a boring movie. It's directed by James Gray, and I gotta give a massive shout out to Hoyt van Hoytema, who is the cinematographer on this film, because nominate this guy for best cinematography. He is fantastic, and he has like the precedent for it too. This is actually the guy who's worked, I believe, on all of Christopher Nolan's films. So like Inception, The Dark Knight, Interstellar, Dunkirk. He's the guy who also did cinematography for those films. And this is just another great example of his work. And that, combined with the set design, this is easily one of the most visually appealing films I've seen all year. And unfortunately, though, I can't deny the fact that I probably wouldn't have enjoyed this film as much if I wasn't watching it on an IMAX screen, or even just like a big movie screen in general, because it's a very slow-paced film. Brad Pitt is once again great in this movie, but his performance is much more subtle. He doesn't have a ton of, like quippy dialogue that he did in Once Upon a Time. He's a much more laid-back and a much more complex character, which was really interesting to see. But there's just not a ton of like action or even drama that's very visible to the naked eye in this film. But that being said, I still loved just looking at this film.
Whatever it takes. Whatever it takes.
Whatever it takes.
Moving into our top 3, we have one of the most anticipated film of this year, Avengers Endgame. I'm sorry if this is too low for some people, although honestly these top 3 films, I feel like I could interchange them. While this is more of kind of like a roller coaster than like an actual film, I think, you cannot deny just the craftsmanship that's on point here, and it's so incredible to see how they wrapped up all these different character arcs. Not all of them, but most of them. And it's directed by the Russo brothers, who have, directed my favorite MCU film, Captain America: The Winter Soldier. And it's this culmination of 22 MCU films, and it's the most epic experience I've ever had in a theater. While I probably enjoyed being with the crowd more in John Wick, seeing all these moments happen on screen, given that I'm just like a massive Marvel fan and I've seen every movie since Captain America: The First Avenger. I've seen every film since then in theaters. It was so great to just see the climax of this film, how epic and grand it was in scope, watching it on the big screen, and I can't even imagine how they planned it out. Like, that just seems like a nightmare. I still, to this day, am thinking to myself, how did they think about putting these characters here, having them do this, say this, with all this other crap going on in the background? It's truly breathtaking. I loved it.
It's not as simple as not being in love anymore.
Eventually, it'll be the two of you having to figure this out. Together.
Hey guys, so a little bit of a problem here. I guess when I recorded this video, it exceeded the limit that my camera could fit on one video clip. And so what my camera does is it tries to split up the clips itself, like through its own artificial intelligence knowledge, stuff like that. So essentially what happened is, because my video was too long, it tried to split it up into two clips, and in doing so, it accidentally clipped the part of my review where I talked about this film, Marriage Story, which is my number 2 spot. And I'm really upset it got cut, because there's a lot of great stuff in there, but regardless, I bring forth to you my opinion in whatever way I can, and if this is it, then so be it. So Marriage Story is a really unique film because it tells this love story through the lens of divorce, and it's so powerful when creating characters around that, because you have Adam Driver and Scarlett Johansson, who are just such amazing actors. They deliver great performances, Oscar-worthy. Well, they did get nominated, but deservedly so. And immediately when this film started, I just completely forgot I was watching a film. Like, the performances, the writing, the scenarios, the dialogue, the cinematography, it transcended the screen, the viewing experience that I was having as an audience member. So I think that when a film can do that, it's the greatest achievement of all time. And that's why it's my number 2 spot, because it's really, really awesome. I love this film.
Now, before we get to our number 1 spot, we have one last honorable mention, and this is Peanut Butter Falcon. Now, I actually just watched this movie yesterday at the time of recording, so honestly, if I had more time to think about it and let the film sink in, I probably would have it on my list. But since I just saw it yesterday and it's still very fresh in my mind, I don't want to prematurely give it a ranking without really thinking about where it would stand on my list, because I thought a lot about where everything should stand on my list. But needless to say, this is the most endearing film I've seen this year. It follows the story of this boy, this young adult with Down syndrome, and he escapes his mental retirement home facility that he was placed in with the hopes of becoming a professional wrestler. And he meets up with Shia LaBeouf and Dakota Johnson, and it's this really sweet adventure. It has a lot of sweet messages about following your dreams and not giving up hope, and also the fact that just because somebody is maybe at a social disadvantage of you, or any type of disadvantage, doesn't mean that they should be denied the same opportunity as any other individual. And I think that's some really powerful stuff, and I really loved seeing that in a film like this, and also seeing a Down syndrome, seeing a person with Down syndrome lead in a film like this, and he does an amazing job. That was so great. I mean, it was super cool, and I can definitely see why some people would put this up at the top of their list. The overall fairy tale aspect of it was a little difficult for me to get over at some points. Like it was hard for me to suspend my disbelief sometimes, but overall it's got a really positive vibe to it, and more time to think about it, I can easily see this bumping its way into my top 10. And with that being said, we move into our number 1 film.
There is one guilty party behind it all.
You know something. Spill it. Oh my God.
Tell me what happened to my grandfather.
This was a film directed by Rian Johnson, who I think does his best work yet here. Now, this is the guy who directed Star Wars The Last Jedi in 2017, which I actually love. I know a lot of people hate it, but I love it. And he totally ups his game in this film. I mean, if you are someone who did not like The Last Jedi, you have to check this movie out if you already haven't, because it's so unique. It's got an ensemble cast that adds so much personality to the film, and I love it when films kind of take risks with their tone and be a little creative with it. It's written so well. Rian Johnson also wrote this film. It's got a lot of twists and turns that take the story in really cool directions. There's stuff that happened early on that separates it from all the other murder mystery films that have come out in the past. And it's got great editing. It's cut together really well. And I think I loved it even more when I watched it again, because I started to notice all these really cool moments of foreshadow that I didn't see before, and visual imagery that, as someone who wants to go in film production, really struck a nerve with me, because it's stuff that I want to start thinking about now when I create my films, and how I can up my level, up my game to create a more interesting and engaging story. It was a super fun experience. I loved every second of it, and please, you have to check this out. Not only just check it out, but check it out with a group. See it with your family, watch it with a bunch of friends. I don't care, because this is a really awesome movie to just sit around with a bunch of people who love a good time and figure out this story. I can't stress that enough, but if you really can't do that, just go watch the movie, because it's awesome. So there you have it, my top 10 films of 2019. I apologize if certain films didn't make it on here. If there's a movie you feel like is missing and should have at least gotten a mention, drop a comment down below. Please keep it civil. Once again, just remember that this is just my opinion. I don't think this is the correct list. It's just my list. Stay tuned next week for my review on 1917. I'm really looking forward to seeing that movie in the next few days. And thanks for keeping with my channel, guys. Peace out.